Howdy folks, this is Andy Curry with Superstars of Horse Training, bringing you another useful and valuable horse training tip to help you train your horses and be safer when you're riding and around horses. Now, this is actually a true story. Her name is Tori Taylor. She sued Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Ross Perot, IBM, David Rockefeller, and NASA. For what? She said she was a cyborg. A cyborg is part human and part robot. She also said she was getting telepathic instructions from Proteus, whoever that is. Her lawsuit was for $5.6 billion. She said the defendants had a secret plan to enslave millions of women like herself. Now that's imagination. Imagination is a great thing to have depending on who has it. Horses, for instance, have what I call magnified imagination. The littlest thing can set them off big. But for you and I, we should have as much imagination as we can when working with our horses. Why? Because we can make them better and safer to ride. And here's the thing. Your imagination of trying to expose the horse to the real world will never equal the real world, because the things that can happen in the real world will astonish you. Thus, try to expose them to as much stuff as you can to compensate for that. To compensate for it, you can come up with scenarios to expose your horse to and then let him figure it out. So what do I mean by letting him figure it out? This is what I mean. At Superstars of Horse Training, we like to feature different trainers so you have a truckload of different ideas and techniques to use when training horses. I don't just show my techniques because it's really dumb and dangerous to learn just one way of working with horses. That's so. We filmed with Scott Dutcher revealing lots of valuable tips and tricks. When we filmed Scott, he worked with a horse he'd never seen. Turns out the horse wasn't overly spooky, but he did have issues. Scott wanted to teach a horse to think through something rather than react. Scott says this makes him safer. A reactionary horse just spooks and runs. That's a recipe for a wreck. A thinking through it horse may spook, but they're safer because they learn to think through the spooky object rather than react and take off bucking, running, or whatever. As an example, Scott showed how to get the horse to cross a tarp. After he had worked with him using ropes for a bit, to get the horse used to rope somewhat, he encouraged the horse to check out a tarp laid on the ground. As the horse approached it, Scott left him alone. As the horse backed off, Scott would let him, but he also kept slight pressure on him to encourage him to go back to it by using the ropes. At first the horse might as well have said, "I ain't doing this." But after a while, the horse not only walked over and on the tarp, Scott was rubbing the noisy tarp all over him. And rather than forcing the horse to accept the tarp and that it was no harm to him after all, Scott let the horse figure it out on his own. Now this is where you have to have patience. And this is where horse training can seem boring. But boring horse training is actually good and sound. So I asked Scott, have you found horses that learn to accept spooky stuff in this manner are safer than those who are forced to accept it? He said yes. So it makes sense, doesn't it? Now Scott is the same guy whose first ranch job landed him as low man on the totem pole. And because of that, he also got the worst and most dangerous horse to ride. No one wanted to ride the horse, but Scott trained him into a masterpiece using some of the very techniques in his DVD. Once his ranching buddies saw how the horse was doing, everyone wanted to ride him. And that's about the end of that tip, except for, in case you're wondering, if Tori Taylor won her case on suing Ross Perot and IBM and NASA and all the others. She did not. The judge said, if this court cannot order a dismissal of this complaint, no district court can ever dismiss any complaint. Have a great day.